Hey, this is Charlie with Church West. Live scan. Oh my gosh. So confusing, so challenging, so much information. Guys, we're going to go through this. We're going to get into the meat on live scan and the problems with it, what's wrong with live scan, and what we deal with when we're talking with online background checks. And let's dig into the meat a little bit so we can get a better understanding so that we can equip your ministry so that you guys can do things the right way and comply with the law and really protect the children and protect the reputation of the church. So number one, we got to use live scan. It's the law. Number two, we got to use it because that's where we're going to get the actual records. And number three, one of the challenges is that LiveScan is only checking California courts, and that's absolutely right. And we hear people that say, hey, you got to use our online background check because it's only DOJ is only checking California courts. They are absolutely correct. But when you go through the LiveScan process, and we have a guide here on how to apply for your LiveScan ORI number and how to get authorized and go through that whole process, which is a whole separate section of this website. When you access the DOJ records, go do that. But you can also access the FBI records, which are the national records. And when you access the national records, then you're going to go beyond what AB 506 is requiring. And you are checking records on a national basis. Which is great. We want to go above and beyond AB 506. And of course, we want to check laws. We want to see if somebody had a problem outside of California before we allow them to work with you. So we want to do live scan. We want to use the DOJ check. And we want to do the FBI check. The third thing you want to get is you want to get a recurring arrest notice. The recurring arrest notice is if somebody is convicted of something or if they're charged with something, you're going to be notified that they've got something new, that's one of the nice parts about LiveScan is that LiveScan is kind of a one and done. As long as somebody is consistently part of your organization, volunteering for your organization, what it's going to do is it makes it so that you don't have to run that background check again. The online background check companies, it concerns them. They're coming back and they realize that they're kind of out of business in California because LiveScan is the path to get the current records and up-to-date records. But most background check companies, it's kind of that recurring revenue that they're dealing with. These are for-profit organizations that are coming out there that are saying, hey, use our online background checks because LiveScan isn't great. And I will tell you, LiveScan isn't perfect. There are holes in the system, but no system is perfect. But this is the one that the law tells you to do, which is LiveScan, fingerprints, DOJ. Want to go above and beyond that, get the FBI check, get the recurring arrest notice so you don't have to do these again. Those are the three steps that you want to take. And then if after you've already done that, you want to go ahead and use an online background check service because of course they will check some other things. Then that's great, but you got to make sure you do those three things first. What I don't want you to do, and this is where there's so much confusion in the industry right now, is that people say, well, hey, there's these problems with LiveScan and the system isn't great and this, that, and the other thing. Use our system, which is easier and it's more convenient, but it's not checking the current records and it's not allowing you to comply with laws. I have ministries that I work with now that have been using systems that have been recommended by the online background check companies, and a child was harmed because they didn't follow the law. And as a result of it, number one, a kid actually, we've had kids actually be seriously harmed. We've had one child that actually died as a result of neglect. And besides that tragedy, what the church is dealing with now is they thought that they were following the right guidance, but they weren't. They were following the guidance of a for-profit organization that said, buy our stuff because it's easier, it's more convenient. But it didn't follow the law. A kid was harmed. In one situation, a child died. And as a result of it, the ministry now has a really, really serious liability situation on their hands. And we want to make sure that we're providing you with the right information. Again, at Church West, we're helping you comply because the only enforcement is really through the insurance companies. And we want to make sure you're doing it the right way. And we want to make sure that you're using LiveScan through the DOJ, do the FBI, do the recurring arrest notice. We don't get paid to do this. Again, we're not in the background check business. And The problem we're running into is that it's the background check business and the background check industry that's saying, hey, LifeScan, there's a lot of problems and it's not so convenient. And so use our stuff and it's easier. Guys, don't even bother using the online background check stuff until you've complied with the law in California. It's going to get the current California records. And when I'm saying do this you're required by law for all employees, all your volunteers that work with youth. But then some ministries are saying, well, what about my security team? They don't work with youth. And what about these people? I'll just do the online background checks for those folks. Well, again, the reason you're doing the background check is to see any conviction that is going to help you determine whether or not they're appropriate to work with your ministry. So really, you should be using LifeScan for those folks as well, not just employees and not just your youth serving volunteers, but any volunteer. So really, the number one step that we need to do is get LifeScan, use that for the state and federal records for all of the background checks that you're going to be running. So some of the things that we've heard is, we've heard there's not an integrated system. And I love having an integrated system where you have like the training module and you have the background check and you have all this stuff where they all interface with one another and it creates ease of use. Guess what? The online background check companies, they do have an integrated system, and that integrated system is pretty handy, and churches have been using these for a while. Guys, because LifeScan doesn't integrate with those systems, it's creating confusion because it's not so easy. But that's a challenge, but it doesn't mean that you shouldn't be using LifeScan and you should be using the online background checks because remember, those online background checks aren't going to be following the law and they aren't going to be checking the current records. Number two, one of the questions we hear is, hey, it's tough. We can't get the applicants to go down and get a fingerprint check. And you're right. And they've said the online background check process has very little effort on part of the applicant. That's one of the words we've heard. It takes little effort. It's easier. They're correct. There is very little effort to do the online background checks. But again, the online background checks don't check the current records and you're not complying with the law. So I'm sorry you can't simply fill out an online form and e-submit it and this, that, and the other thing. You have to go through the LifeScan process for anybody that you're running the background check on. Another challenge, the cost. Online background checks in the past, $6, $10, $20, whatever the cost is, relatively inexpensive. And that's true. It is less expensive to do those checks. But remember what I said earlier, for LA County, in order to get current records, you have to pay somebody to go down to the courts now. And if you have them go down to the courts, that's an additional cost. And so in the long run, an online background check actually costs you more money if you're going to do it right. And remember, LifeScan, it's roughly $40, $50, something like that. The online background check, you have to do it every couple of years, where LifeScan, it's one and done. So it's more investment in time, a little bit more expensive, but in the long run, it is more efficient and it's getting you current records. In the long run, it ends up costing you less. All right, another thing that we hear about is that fingerprinted offenses only show up in some things. You want to check more than that. That's true. And that might be the time when, after you've already done LifeScan for FBI and DOJ and you want to go for additional things, because there are times when you're going to want to do an exhaustive search for people that are really engaged with your youth, where you want to go above and beyond, then maybe go ahead and do an online background check for one of those. But the DOJ check and the FBI check using fingerprints, that's meeting the law, and it's going to be it's kind of the gold standard. It's really that first, that's the standard that we really should be meeting. So there are some problems and there are some things that you're going to find with an online background check that you're not going to find with FBI and DOJ. But really, we want to, again, follow the law, and we want to do what's right. And I think, and I'll say this is my opinion because I've seen the criticism of the FBI check, and a lot of that has been by the FBI themselves. But they've made really significant improvements in recent years because both Republicans and Democrats are saying, hey, we should be having a good path for doing fingerprint checks for people that are purchasing guns. And so they've improved it for the fingerprint check process for gun purchases, and they're actually improving their database for youth service organizations. So it is getting better. The records are getting better. The process is getting better for the FBI checks. So, which is really good. I've also heard that it doesn't check the sex offender registry. You can do a parallel check. You can go to Megan's Law website, and you can also search that as well. But the FBI and the DOJ check is going to use the criminal offenses, and they're going to check the criminal offenses that feed Megan's Law, and so it's going to be checking that as well. So, but I've heard that people have said, hey, it doesn't do a Megan's Law check. Well, you can do that for free on your own, and it is going to check the convictions that feed the database for Megan's Law. There's been some questions that say, hey, the technical way to do live scan, you're relying on somebody to do it the right way. That's true. It's the fingerprint process is a little bit difficult. We found that some people that don't have really strong fingerprints, it's hard to pick up the fingerprint, but it just takes a little bit of time, and you kind of work through it. And it's getting you better information than somebody using a name and other personally identifiable information to do the background check. So the fingerprint is really becoming the standard, and it's good. I think it's good that we're going this direction, because we want to make sure we're getting good records when we're making these decisions. So the question, did AB 506 lower the bar when it comes to protecting our youth? Some people have said, yes, we are. You know what? I got to tell you, I think it's great. I think it's really good that we finally have this standard that says we've got to meet this standard. And AB 506 has done a good job saying, hey, this is the background check that you need to use in order to meet the standard of care as a youth serving organization. So I think that's great. It does a very good job on saying, hey, got to do background checks on these people, which is all employees, not just employees that work with youth, but all employees and all volunteers that work with youth. I would argue that you should have really all of your volunteers go through LiveScan, because they're all representatives of your ministry. And I think it's better to do the background checks on really all of your volunteers. But I don't think it's lowered the bar. It's kind of set that initial bar that's lower than most ministries have already been meeting. But it sets the bar for background checks. It also is doing training for identifying neglect, identifying abuse, and the right way to report abuse and report neglect. And it's saying, hey, we want to train everybody on how to do it. I will tell you, I think where AB 506 was weak is that it wasn't really aggressive in saying, hey, let's prevent abuse. And that's really not the intent of AB 506 in these background checks. It wasn't really about preventing abuse. It does say you've got to have 2 mandated reporters present, which is a whole other challenge. But we need to do more, and we need to make efforts to train everybody to prevent abuse from happening, prevent abuse among peers. That is the biggest area where we find abuse, is peer-to-peer abuse. But those are other areas. Those are separate from AB 506, and we need to be doing both. And the problem and the big challenge is that there's not a really good system that integrates both. AB 506 is kind of its own piece, and regarding the background checks, the 2 adults, and the abuse and neglect identification and reporting. And it's a challenge, and I'm sorry it's not all together. There's not a good path in order to get the background checks, but that's just the reality of it. So anyway, hey, what you'll find more of on this website is you're going to find guides to getting your ORI numbers, which is what you need in order to get your authorization. It is a tough process. It's not as easy as it was to do the online background checks. I'm sorry, but it is more difficult. We've got a guide that tells you how to do it, the forms that you're going to need to fill out in order to send somebody to go get their fingerprint checks. We've got model policies, we've got other resources for you. And of course, what we have is we're accessible. So if you need help, if you need a little bit more information, please reach out. We try to put all that we can. We try to put all that we can here on the website for you as a permanent resource for you. But we'll be always updating it and providing more information for you. So anyway, I hope that helps clarify some of the issues about the background checks, but there are problems with LiveScan. But that's the way that we need to go. And so I hope it was helpful for you. Thanks. Have a great day.